It is not a coincidence that you are here. Something inside you has pushed you to seek answers, to make sense of what you have experienced. And when you get to the end of this video, everything will be incredibly clearer. You are a kind, helpful person, always ready to help. But then, why do some treat you with condescension? Why is the respect you give not always returned? You would expect your kindness to create deeper connections, to be recognized and appreciated. Instead, too often, it seems to bring you the opposite effect. You are ignored, exploited, or even belittled. It's not bad luck. A precise dynamic rooted in human psychology is at play. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, that hidden part of the mind that manifests itself in the most unexpected ways. And one of these manifestations is precisely contempt for those who do not impose clear limits. Today, you will discover the 5 reasons why your kindness can make you lose the respect of others, and above all, how to protect yourself without giving up who you are. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to the Mental Dose channel and Telegram channel so you don't miss the next videos on personal and spiritual growth. And now, let's begin. The kinder you are, the more superficially people relate to you. You try to be respectful, understanding, and generous. And yet, there is always someone who seems to take you for granted, ignore you, or even exploit you. You have been taught that being good means doing the right thing. So why, instead of receiving respect, do you often find yourself treated as if you were of lesser value? The answer is simple. Kindness is not always seen as a quality, but often as an opportunity. So, here are the 5 reasons why your being too kind has led you to be underestimated by those who have failed to recognize the true value of your generosity. Reason 1. Boundless kindness is seen as weakness. Humans are wired to test boundaries. If you are always available, if you always say yes, put other people's needs before your own without ever drawing a boundary, some will begin to perceive you as manipulable. In psychology, this phenomenon is called the benevolence exploitation effect. If you don't set boundaries, anyone can enter your emotional sphere and take what they want, without worrying about the consequences. In many social and professional situations, people are more likely to respect those who demonstrate a clear sense of their own limitations. On the other hand, those who always appear available are perceived as someone they can count on without having to give anything in return. This can result in your kindness being abused, not necessarily out of malice, but because your constant presence reduces the perception of your value. The solution is not to stop being kind, but to learn to firmly define your limits and communicate them clearly to others. Jung said that no one can have a clear conscience without knowing their shadow. When your kindness lacks boundaries, you not only allow others to take advantage of it, but you also give up the possibility of integrating your more assertive and conscious side. The shadow is not only the set of repressed impulses, but also the qualities that you do not recognize in yourself, such as the ability to say no or protect your space. If you do not learn to balance your altruistic nature with healthy self-defense, others will end up seeing in you someone they can use at will, rather than a person with their own inner strength. Reason 2. Your kindness reflects the insecurities of others. There are people who are not ready to receive kindness without suspecting an ulterior motive. This is because your kindness acts as a mirror. It exposes their inability to give without expecting anything in return. Those who have built an armor based on cynicism and mistrust perceive your authenticity as a danger. Your presence becomes a silent reminder that there is another way of life, one in which not everything is based on calculation and interest. But instead of welcoming this awareness, they prefer to reject it with indifference or contempt. For some, your generosity is a threat because it forces them to confront their own selfishness or unresolved wounds. Some people have had experiences that have led them to believe that every act of kindness has an ulterior motive, or that the only way to survive is through distrust. Their instinct is not to appreciate your altruism, but to disparage it, because that way, they can keep their worldview intact. In these cases, their disdain has nothing to do with you, but with their deepest insecurities and self-sabotage. Jung spoke of the shadow as that hidden part of the psyche that contains everything we refuse to accept about ourselves. When your kindness collides with someone who has repressed their ability to trust, the result is an unconscious reaction of rejection. Your altruism becomes the reflection of what they have denied within themselves, and instead of acknowledging it, they project it onto you in the form of distrust or hostility. This projection mechanism protects them from having to face their own insecurities, but condemns them to a worldview of distrust and fear. Reason 3. Going against social norms creates resistance. We live in a society where toughness is often rewarded, and competition is seen as the only path to success. In this context, a kind, generous, and respectful person can be perceived as an anomaly. Being good means not playing the game of ego and power. It doesn't mean being naive, but it means choosing not to conform to the toxic dynamics that many consider normal. People are accustomed to a mentality based on quid pro quo, the exchange of favors and convenience, and when they encounter someone who acts without expecting anything in return, their value system is challenged. Some may interpret it as naivety, while others may feel threatened by the fact that there is an alternative to their social norms. This can lead to reactions of rejection, sarcasm, or exclusion because your presence itself becomes a challenge to the way they have always lived. But the truth is that those who reject kindness do so because they are not ready to accept it. In many cases, it is not you who must change, but this person who must mature the awareness that kindness is not a weakness, but a conscious choice. Carl Jung argued that what you resist persists, and this is also true in social dynamics. When you choose to be authentic in a world that rewards the mask of ego, you inevitably become a disturbance for those who are used to moving according to patterns of power and opportunism. Your kindness, instead of being well welcomed, can arouse hostility because it forces others to confront their own shadows, the parts of themselves that they have repressed or hidden behind the armor of competition. Before we look at the last 2 reasons, I sincerely hope you are enjoying this video. If so, don't forget to share it with anyone you think could benefit from it. Also, if you want to support our channel and work, I remind you that you can leave a donation by clicking the thank you button below the video. We will be infinitely grateful. And now, let's continue. Reason 4. Generosity is perceived as an invitation to sacrifice. Those who give without asking often find themselves in a role they never chose, that of the person who always has to be there, always listen, always help. And when you become the person who is always there, others begin to believe that you don't need anything. The result? Your needs fade into the background. People start to take your presence for granted, as if your time and energy were inexhaustible resources and as if you had superpowers. This leads to a vicious circle. The more available you are, the more other people stop considering your needs. A dynamic is created in which your role becomes that of constant support for those around you, without anyone really caring about you. This happens because your altruism is seen as a stable and unchangeable characteristic. People get used to receiving without wondering if you need something in return. The truth is that respect is not only achieved with kindness, but also with the ability to say no. You cannot be a pillar of support for someone if you do not protect yourself first. Learning to say, "I need time for myself," or "I can't this time," does not mean being less generous or mean, but simply respecting your own emotional balance. Jung said that if a person wants to see the good in you, they will see it. If they want to see the bad, they will see it, and it depends more on them than on you. When you constantly offer yourself to someone without asking for anything in return, you're not only giving help, but you are also teaching this person how to treat you. If you sacrifice yourself without ever expressing your needs, those around you will end up believing that you have none. The shadow generosity is precisely this, the risk of becoming invisible, of existing only in function of what you can give. But true altruism is not nullifying yourself. It is knowing when to give without losing yourself in the process. Reason 5. Your unlimited availability nullifies the value of your goodness. When something is always accessible, it ceases to be appreciated, and this also applies to people. If those around you know that you are and will always be there, ready to help without ever asking for anything in return, they risk no longer seeing the value of your presence. It is not a matter of becoming selfish, but remembering that goodness has a weight and emotional cost, and must be offered consciously. Carl Jung argued that the balance between light and shadow is essential to living in harmony. If you give without measure, without respecting your boundaries, the risk is that your own goodness will turn into a source of suffering. People tend to value what is not always available. If you are constantly ready to help, your support becomes a habit, not an appreciated gesture. In the long run, this can lead to feeling empty, tired, and maybe even resentful towards those who do not recognize your effort. The solution is simple. We must understand that generosity is valuable only when it is given with awareness. Offering help does not mean having to be always available, but choosing when and to whom to give your support. The true value of kindness lies in knowing how to manage it, not in offering it unconditionally without receiving anything in return. Jung argued that the balance between light and shadow is essential to living in harmony. If you offer your goodness without measure, without respecting your boundaries and values, you risk turning it into a source of suffering. When a positive quality such as generosity is not balanced by awareness of one's limits, the shadow takes over in the form of exhaustion, resentment, or devaluation by others. True respect does not come from being always available, but from the ability to dose what you offer, preventing your goodness from becoming invisible to the eyes of others. And what about you? Have you ever felt taken for granted because of your kindness? Have you found a way to enforce your boundaries without giving up who you are? Share your experience with us in the comments, and see you in the next video.